What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I'm very excited today. I've got a couple of things. One, I got my hat in, finally. Took a couple weeks of waiting. I got a bunch of other merch that is designed and on the way, one of which is a hoodie that I'm very excited for. But something seems off to you guys in here. Something seems off to me. What's this? It's stuck. Okay. So that's stuck. Let's try something else. I'm certainly glad we got that over with. It's a lot of work. Got a new desk, got a new computer, new everything. Super excited about that. But now, here's what you clicked on the video for. So today we're going to talk about the 5 biggest mistakes that every beginner photographer, including myself, tends to make and how to avoid it. Number 1, and this is probably the most common one that I have ever seen and something that I am so obscenely guilty of when I first started. Oversaturation. Now, every beginner photographer thinks that the more saturated your photo is, the more color there is, the better the image is. That's not actually the case. I have personally taken a lot of photos where I've completely gotten rid of the saturation altogether. I'm not saying black and white, but making it more of a dull tone. And I'll throw some examples up on the screen to show you what I'm talking about. Now, this first image here, I took on my Rebel T6. And APS-C camera, that's not what the issue is. The issue is I took this image and I hit auto in Lightroom and completely ruined the photo. And I took the auto and I cranked the saturation all the way up because I didn't think there was enough color there. And I completely oversaturated the image and it made it look completely unrealistic, super grainy, and it just looked like garbage. Don't make this mistake. Beginner mistake number 2, shooting wide open. Now, this mistake doesn't actually apply to all lenses. It's more specifically in regards to extremely wide aperture lenses and prime lenses, like this 85-1.4 that I have right here. The only time I've ever shot with this wide open is when I need that extra few stops of light. Other than that, I'm not shooting at 1.4, I'm shooting at 1.8, I'm shooting at f2. Only at nighttime do I actually shoot wide open, because I need it. When you're shooting street photography at 1 o'clock in the morning, you need that extra stop of light. There's not a lot of light, ambient light around to get that from. When I'm shooting in a studio, I never shoot wide open. As a matter of fact, whenever I shoot in a studio, my default is f8 because you don't need it. When you shoot in a studio, you have additional lights and flashes and strobes you can get to increase your chances of getting that shot that you want. The other reason you shouldn't shoot wide open all the time, especially with a lens that goes down to f1.4 or f1.2, is because you don't always want that background completely blown out, especially when you're taking portraits. If you just want like a headshot, fine, go nuts. But if you want to tell a story, I forgot to turn my notifications off. Where was I? Oh yeah. If you want to tell a story, you're going to have more than just the face, more than just the head. You're going to have something behind you, or behind your subject. What exactly is the point of shooting in beautiful locations with good lighting if you can't even see the location? I mean, yeah, having that nice depth of field is fantastic. There's nothing better than good bokeh. But the downside is you have this beautiful scenery. Like, I went and shot in Van Dusen Botanical Gardens here in Vancouver month and a half, 2 months ago, and it's completely pointless if you can't see the beautiful gardens and the greenery and all the beautiful plants, the pathways, some of the architecture they have there. If that's all blown out, why are you taking the photo? Just to get a nice photo of someone's face? If that's what you're going for, absolutely. However, you gotta tell a story with your photos. And I'm not saying stop it down all the way. No, that's not what I'm saying. If you have something that shoots f1.4, try f1.8 or f2 like I do. There is, however, another reason for this, is because when you shoot wide open on almost any lens, you're gonna have a couple of things: warping and vignetting. Granted that, especially in Lightroom, I'm not sure about other editing programs because I've only ever really used Lightroom for photos, they have lens corrections, meaning it'll get rid of the warping and get rid of the vignetting for you. There's an automatic setting for it in Lightroom. Now this next one is actually something that took me a little while to get myself, and I really only stopped doing it maybe a year and a bit into learning how to do photography and taking it seriously. And that's shooting in harsh light. Now when I say shooting in harsh light, I don't mean over cranking your ISO or having too slow a shutter speed or having your flashes too bright if you're using an off-camera flash. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about harsh light, the sun. If you talk to any experienced photographer, they will tell you that their favorite time to shoot outside is one of two times: golden hour or when it's overcast. Now there's a very good reason for this. Sunset, the sun isn't directly hitting your subject. All you're getting with the sunset is the residual light from the sun, that orange golden feeling, which is why it's called golden hour. Now, shooting when it's overcast has the same effect as a big softbox. And if you don't know what a softbox is, I'll make a video about that, or you can just Google it. But basically it diffuses the light that goes through it. Everyone who knows how to use a flash has a softbox of some kind, because you can't just shoot harsh light at your subject directly from the flash. It diffuses the light over your subject and gives a much softer look to the image. The clouds do the exact same thing for the sun. It diffuses the light, gives much nicer shadows, much better separation, more of a fade depending on where you're positioning your subject. But the point stands. If you're shooting in broad daylight, noon, first thing in the morning, middle of the afternoon, the sun is going to hit your subject and you're going to have a couple of problems. One is overexposure, because even at 1/8,000th of a second, you're not going to be able to properly expose your subject. At noon, in say the middle of summer, it's not going to work out for you. You're going to have extremely harsh shadows. It's going to be very contrasty, very, not black and white, but you're going to be able to tell the difference. It just doesn't look very good at all. You're going to have to do a lot of post, and even then, the image isn't going to look super fantastic. Now, shooting animals can be a bit different because they have fur and layers, and I don't shoot wildlife normally, but I'm sure there are videos you can look on that. But I'm sure there are videos you can look up about wildlife photography and shooting in broad daylight. Now, it is possible to get good shots in broad daylight and harsh lighting, but it's incredibly difficult. Even I am very bad at it. That's why I always bring, if I'm shooting in broad daylight, I will bring a off-camera flash, a softbox, a few lighting stands, and I will set up a scene and drop either my f-stop or my shutter speed to cut out a lot of that ambient light. So the only light that's coming through is going to be the light from the flash, and just enough light to illuminate the background. That's enough about shooting in harsh light. On to the next topic. Shooting with the wrong focal length. Now you may think that this will only affect people who can afford better gear, better cameras, better lenses. It doesn't. This affects anybody who has ever bought a DSLR or mirrorless camera that has a kit lens of any kind, or any lens you have ever bought. There is a science and deductive reasoning to picking what lenses that you want to buy based on what you're shooting. Now, if you want to be more of a portrait photographer, which I tend to be more associated with portrait photography than any of my landscape or street photos, you're going to want to go with a focal length of 50 millimeters or above. but there's a reason for this. The wider of a focal length that you shoot at, the more it's going to stretch and elongate the human face, unfortunately. And that's not to say that wide angles can't be incredibly useful, just not for portraits. They can, however, be very useful for editorial or fashion photography. And I'm sure I can link to a few photographers that I definitely know that have used incredibly wide angle lenses, anywhere from 14 to 20 millimeter lenses, specifically for fashion and editorial. But if you just have a kit lens, here's what you should use for portrait photography. Now, me personally, unless I'm trying to capture the landscape around somebody, I'm not going to use the 24 millimeter in this 24 to 105, which has become more of the most common kit lens that any given company will give out. For me, this is the one that Canon gave me when I bought my R. But if I'm shooting portraits, I'm going to be shooting between 50 millimeters and 100 millimeters, because in that range is the most complementary to the human face. That is exactly why I love my 85, because it gives me the exact amount of compression that is complementary enough to the human face to make it look real, to make it look like you're standing right there, as opposed to having a stretched out, elongated head when you shoot with a wide angle or a fisheye or anything of that degree. And going back to wildlife photography that I mentioned before, that I have no idea at all how to do wildlife photography, but I'll tell you one thing right now, a kit lens is not going to cut it. You're going to need a much longer lens, because unless you want to be getting right up in, say, a lion's face with a 24 mil, you probably want to get a longer lens. But that is a very nice segue into my fifth and final point, worrying about what gear you're shooting with. Now, for most beginner photographers, unless you're a doctor or lawyer and you're shooting on a very expensive Leica, you're not going to be able to afford incredibly expensive glass or incredibly expensive bodies. Me personally, I started out with a Canon Rebel T6 with the basic kit lens and a 50mm f1.8, the Canon Nifty 50. Now, I'll be the first to admit, when I first picked up a camera, I was not good at photography. I had no idea what I was doing, and I rarely took good photos. However, that does not mean that because I was terrible when I first started, that you are going to be terrible when you first start. I have seen so many photographers shoot on a Micro Four Thirds or an APS-C size camera and turn out stuff better than what I'm turning out with my R and my big lenses. Far better. I don't even come close. For example, I've got a friend, his name is Mark, and he recently, within the last year, started picking up photography, and his wonderful girlfriend, who's also a friend of mine, Michelle, recently bought him a Canon, I think it was a 70D for his birthday, and a bunch of lenses. He had a pick of a, granted that's an APS-C sized camera, but he's still churning out fantastic photos. He's been taking great product shots. I've had him in the apartment and in the studio, taking great product shots. We went out and we did some street photography a month and a bit ago. It was fantastic. The kind of photos he's getting is unreal. He picked up on it so quick, and it was really impressive to me. Unlike a lot of photographers, I don't have that natural talent, that natural eye for looking at things. I get my photos purely based on the analytical standpoint of it. I'm able to understand and analyze the settings and the gear, the specs, and what I'm going to need to get a specific shot that I'm looking for. For me, I do a lot of my photography based on two things. One is my passion and drive for creating photos and creating cool content and showing everybody how I see the world based on how everyone else sees the world. But how I shoot isn't here, it's up here. I think and compose everything I do, and I pay very close attention to the specs. And if I have a camera in my hands, no matter what it is, chances are, because I have the experience now as opposed to when I first started, I'd probably be able to get some pretty darn good shots. And there are going to be a lot of people out there, like Mark, for example, who just pick it up like that. Don't necessarily quite know what they're doing yet, but they're taking amazing photos and they're learning as they go. The whole point of this is don't worry about what kind of gear you have or what you're shooting with or what you can or can't afford. Start with what you have. If all you have is a cell phone, use a cell phone, right? If all you can afford is something like this, an old Canon film camera with a kit lens, do it. Especially if you want to learn how to do film photography, which I haven't done in a very long time, but it is fun. Anyways, I'm rambling. There is absolutely no point in being overly serious about anything that you're doing or anything that you're shooting. The point is to go out, have fun, and enjoy yourself. Create something. That's when I'm happiest, is when I'm creating something. If I have my headphones in and I'm running around downtown with nothing but my camera body and one lens, I'm the happiest person in the world. So this week I challenge you. Go out, create something, tag me in the posts on Instagram. I'd love to see your work. That being said, that's where we're going to wrap it up for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Hit that like button if you like this video. Hit subscribe if you want to see more. Go check out some of my other videos, and I will see you next week.